so much, everybody, for joining us for another episode of Coro Chronicles podcast. And today I have an unexpected friendship with this beautiful human. And I'm so excited to introduce y'all to Joel High. And I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit too. But Joel is just one of those people that when I was first introduced to him, it's like the world of caregiving needs to have a lot of Joels in the world. So with that being said, Joel, the one thing I did realize when we were trying to set up this podcast is that when our paths crossed, I never really dug into how you got here. Because that's the one thing you and I know, that all of us have a story.
Yes.
And the ones of us that have been around for a really long time have a really meaningful personal story. And so I would love for you to share that with all of us.
Okay. Thanks for having me on the podcast, Debbie. I appreciate it. It's a great opportunity and a great honor. So yeah, let me spend a little time talk a little bit about myself, which is not something I like to do, but I will. In my current incarnation, I am the owner of Care Patrol of Omaha. We are a senior advisor agency. We work with seniors and their families, helping them find their next place to live. Typically, that's assisted living, memory care. Sometimes it's independent or active 55 living. And sometimes it means helping them connect with the resources so that they can stay home a little bit longer. But we want to make sure that they're in the right place for them so that they can thrive and not just survive. Because I think people still have a lot of living left to do. And we want to make sure that they can live their most full life at the stage they are. I came to my role at Care Patrol in a very circuitous way. So I've been in healthcare for more than 25 years now. I started out in healthcare. I don't know where to start my story, but I'm going to.
That's where I want you to start. Go back 25 years.
Okay. I'm going to start at 25. I could go back a little bit further, but I'm not going to. So I started in healthcare as a hospice chaplain. I served in hospice for, I think, about 7 years as a chaplain in 2 different hospice agencies. And I absolutely loved being a chaplain in hospice. But I also knew that there was more that I needed to do. And I wanted to be able to touch more people's lives. And so I moved into working as a chaplain in hospitals, and then eventually moved into hospital administration. My primary role in hospital administration was as a patient experience officer. So I served doing patient experience work at at one hospital in particular, and then across a healthcare system here in Omaha, Nebraska, where I live. And I did that for a few years, but it was always part of my continuing mission in hospice, which was really what informed me to do patient experience, because hospice is very patient-centered, very family-centered, but not all of healthcare is. And I wanted to see that more of healthcare should be patient-centered and family-centered. And so that's the work that I did there. And that work led me to go into consulting. And I worked and did consulting around patient experience for a number of years. And then that continued to morph over time to the point where I became the director of product management for a healthcare IT firm, which is where we met, Debbie.
Yeah.
And was where I was when I felt this pull back to hospice. I was doing good work, but it was so far removed from working with people on a day-to-day basis, especially after COVID and when we were doing things like this on Zoom. And so I was searching for a way to get back to working directly with people. And that's when the opportunity to open a Care Patrol franchise here in Omaha happened. And I took the leap to do that because it allowed me to get back to working directly with families and helping them at a time in their life when they were looking to make a transition. And one that, while it's not as final as hospice, it is still a tremendously emotional transition for people. And causes grief and causes strife and all of these things potentially. Sometimes it's wonderful too. But there is a lot there for families, and I want to help guide them through that, help them to make the right choices for themselves and their loved ones so that they can get to that place where they're going to be happy and living life to the fullest.
Wow, your background. Me, I already knew pretty much it was amazing. Anyone who knows me, that the minute I find out someone has been a chaplain at any part of their career or their journey, I am captivated by, because it is the ultimate in self-giving, self-serving, and knowing a little bit about your background. And like I said, I'm just lucky that our paths crossed. But I am curious, especially because you have such a breadth of experience in really caring for. And I don't know if you remember this, but even with our co-founder, with David, his one of the foundations of why he started Coro is he went to his mother, who had been a traveling hospice nurse for about 40 years. And he just asking her, do you use music or spiritual support? And she pops open her trunk and shows all these Walkmen and these CDs. And the majority of the music that she shared was a lot of hymns and things like that, because it, like you said, in that transition. But then, yes, as adult children, and I count myself in this, it is a very difficult transition. Going back to the beginning and what you experienced and such the diversity. If you could think of a moment that really impacted you, either as a chaplain or administrator or serving a family, that really solidified for you.
As you were saying that, there's so many different stories. There's so many different people that I could talk about. But I would say when I was in a divinity school, I was never intending to be a chaplain. I was intending to be a congregational minister. And then midway through my program, one of my grandmothers died very suddenly. She had a massive heart attack, and I got back home. She was still with us at that point, and she was actually making some progress. Ultimately, she did pass away there in the hospital. And the experience, at least as I remember it, that my family and I had at the moment, or right after she had died, was one that has stayed with me and has been one that I've used to inform the work that I do with families and individuals to this day. And two things happened. The first is that the doctor came in and told my family that my grandmother had ceased respiration. And that was how he said that she had died. And we had to pull it out of him, and that was his terminology, which to me is even worse than she expired. I don't think people are gallons of milk. They don't expire, they die. And so then, because my family was Catholic growing up, they had a priest come into the room, to the family room where we were all gathered. And the priest who came into the room walked in and said, "So I understand someone's died." And I thought again, that could have been handled so much better than being introduced like that. "I'm sorry. I understand that your grandmother just passed away." There's so many things you could have said there, but both of those two experiences, at that moment, I said, I wasn't planning to be a chaplain, but now there's a challenge in front of me. And that challenge is to treat people in the way that I wanted my family to be treated. And so that's stuck with me from now on. And I hope that in the work that I do today, even with families, working with them to help find the right senior living environment for them, that I'm being as compassionate and as present as I would want somebody to be with me.
And I'm so sorry for that experience, but then on the same side, I'm also grateful for it, because I know you, and I know, because of just you sharing this story, and it is part of everything that you do, every person that you touch, every conversation that you have. And so for you, it was a significant moment, but that significant moment, you have made moments for so many other people. And I know, especially, in fact, I was just having this conversation a couple of days ago about how we even receive spiritual support in healthcare. And I read a study that I was a little shocked by, but like 41% of people that receive spiritual support in long-term care, it's coming from family or friends. And
Right.
that doesn't even identify if the family or friends are even of the same community of faith. And then after that, 29% of it is healthcare providers. And so I know for a lot of the trainings I've done over the years that I've asked that question. If you were asked to provide some kind of spiritual support, what do you do? And it's just like, I avoid it because it's too confrontational or I might get it wrong. And then at the end, it's only, I think the report was like 16% are actually clergy or chaplains.
Right.
Yeah, so for you to even step into this world when there's such a scarcity, I mean, that's just so powerful. And especially for the families that, because you're right, my husband was a hospice nurse for a number of years, and it is a transition, obviously, but but because it's definitive, so there's an element that you have to accept it in that moment or soon. But when you're that adult child making these decisions, and that's going to bring me into a question, and maybe it's better for me to ask the question first. So are you sitting with someone like me who's talking about my mom or my dad needs help, or are you bringing in the whole family and my mom or my dad would be there too and having a discussion? Like, what is that process like?
It's different for every family and individual that I work with. I strive to meet people where they are, and every family is different. But I want to include as many different people as possible in that conversation for a variety of reasons. First of all, I don't want anybody to feel like they haven't had a voice in where dad's going to move or what happens to mom next or whatever it is, but don't want anybody to feel left out. I can't control all of that because families are families. I let the family lead. And typically when I get that phone call from somebody or I make a phone call to somebody because a social worker made a referral and gave me the information, I am asking them who should be involved. And should mom be involved? And sometimes we want mom involved right now. And sometimes we want to bring her in later after we've talked a little bit more. So we have more information to share with her. Sometimes if somebody their dementia has progressed far enough, it's not really useful for them to be part of that conversation because they can't make any decisions. And even if we do take them on a tour or whatever it is, they're not really comprehending what's happening. But if they want to be involved or if the family wants them to be involved, then we make sure that they're involved. The other piece is what I found out over the years of doing this is that the person that I first came into contact with may or may not be the primary influencer. And we have to make sure that the primary influencer is involved in the conversation because we'll get stopped dead in our tracks if we're not having that person involved because we can't make decisions without them. And that person may be a formal influencer because they may be the medical or financial power of attorney, or they may just be the strongest voice in the family. And so whoever that is, we have to make sure that they're included if we can. And so that can derail what we're trying to do if we haven't done that. So to answer your question, I'm sitting down with some number of the family members and or individual. Occasionally it is just an individual who's moving and they're making decisions for themselves. And the other people aren't, well, they may not be close, they may not be involved, they may live out of town for whatever reason. So they're not included in the conversation, but we take it on a family by family basis of who needs to be involved.
I do have a curiosity question. There's something you just mentioned that sometimes people, let's just say you said 55 or older. I'm getting really close to that number. That individual that, let's just say, is already living in independent living or assisted living, or let's just say independent living.
Yeah.
And it's just not, they want something different. What are those kind of conversations now? Because yet again, things that I see on my side, like there was a report that I saw about the number of devices
Mhm.
that a person has going into a community. So technology now is, and like you said, COVID was a big tsunami of,
Right.
and I didn't want to have a smartphone, but now I have a smartphone and things like that. Is that becoming a part of the conversation now when people are moving to a community? Are they asking about, can I bring my smart TV? Can I bring my iPad? Can I bring my smartphone?
Yeah, definitely, and it's really not much of a conversation because they can bring whatever they want to bring, right?
Okay,
And
okay,
the expectation is that they will bring those things,
okay.
that most people aren't moving into assisted living and setting up a landline. They some of the communities have landlines that are available, but most people aren't doing that. They have their mobile phone that they're using and they're comfortable with, and that's what they've been using. And some people even take it to the point where here's the chance to finally cut the cord with the landline that we've had, but we're not using anymore. But we had it because people knew that phone number. And but now that we're moving, we're just going to get rid of it completely. And then, yeah, the communities have access to they people have access to Wi-Fi, they have access to cable TV or satellite TV as part of the rent that they pay each month. And so their expectation is they're going to be bringing that TV into the community or getting a new one. More and more people that I work with are just leaving all of their stuff behind and they go to the store. Their family goes to the store, they order a new bed, a new couch, a new chair, a new TV. And I don't know if you know about this, but big around here and in other parts of the country is the Nebraska Furniture Mart. It's a huge,
Oh,
sprawling home, everything for your home store, from
oh,
electronics
wow.
to appliances to
So they're leaving it all behind and walking
yeah,
through those front doors.
it's commonly called the mart. They go to the mart, they order everything, have it delivered, and the delivery people come and set it up for them, and that makes moving that much easier.
Not much easier.
Yeah. So now the Nebraska Furniture Mart has a plug on your
Has a plug. Yeah, it's interesting to me, like thinking about your position, like you said, it's like because every person's different. So
right.
what's important to them versus even what I've had some really hard conversations over the years of even just music and or even spirit. What is their community of faith?
Right.
And you alluded to a moment ago about memory care and how that's a really hard place. And even
Mhm.
for adult children over the years. I mean, I've been now with Coro for what, 15 years. I spent my first 5 in memory care. And that's what I had to get used to being able to say to them is that we need to meet them where they are, not
Right.
where you want them to be. And like even having those conversations of music. Oh, my dad loves country. He loves country.
Mhm.
You've got to play country. And we play that, nothing happens. There's no light, there's no engagement. But it's because we learned where he is in his lifeline. He hasn't been introduced to country because he didn't
Yeah, right.
he didn't love country until his 40s. And he's now in love with jazz because that's where he was up until his 30s. So I could not imagine in your position having these conversations, and especially with the adult. I'm assuming, like, especially when it's time for when let's just say that a daughter, I'm going to take care of my father. He's been living with me. I now know I cannot take care of him. We're trying to do everything that we could. Like, what is that type of experience like when an adult child reaches out to you and starts to have these really hard, almost guilt ridden, I would imagine, conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different for everybody. Depends on where folks are and what they promise mom and dad and how they see that transition into a senior community. Because realistically, you are still taking care of them. You're saying, in essence, I can no longer do this myself and I need somebody else to help so that you continue to be safe and can thrive.
Mm,
And so I think reframing it into you're still taking care of your mother, you're still taking care of your dad, you're just letting somebody else help with that.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, so
Uh,
and I also like to talk to people about your kids going to college, right? We're
mm,
so excited for our kids to go to college, and we do get sad when they're not there on a daily basis, but we see the possibility that is there for them once they've left the nest. And I think the same is true for our elders, that sometimes by us keeping them at home, we're actually not allowing them to experience the possibility of what this stage of life can be like. Because if you think about it, if we're at home in a multi-generational family, right? Mom lives here with us, husband and
right.
wife go to work all day long, the
Mhm.
kids go to school all day long, mom is here by herself. Maybe she has a caregiver come in, maybe she goes to an adult day program, but she's still alone. And then when everybody gets home, they're around her, they spend time with her to differing degrees, but the one thing that's missing for her is a peer group. And while we have this notion that being with family is the right way to do things, sometimes it limits people's ability to remain socially active. And they are, while they have all these family members around them, they still becoming very isolated and very lonely because they don't interact with their peer group. And so by moving them into a senior community, now they can interact with this peer group, they can thrive, and they can share stories about things that they knew growing up that other people can relate to. They can, like you and I, we may be able to talk about our experiences at Lollapalooza back in the 90s, right? But if I talk to grandma about that, I might listen to grandma's stories about going to Woodstock, but I wasn't at Woodstock and I can't relate to grandma in the same way that maybe somebody else in that senior community who had the same experience, and they could share these stories. And it's different. And you haven't let your mom down. You've actually allowed her to live more to her potential in this stage of life. That's how I like to look at it and reframe it
No,
for
I
people.
love that. In fact, because this, I'm going to take your words of wisdom because I have a few friends that are going through this, and they feel like they're doing something wrong, or that they need to be a better daughter or a better son and stuff. And it's just like what you just said. So I'm going to totally, in fact, even when this podcast is over, I'm probably going to send it to them.
And the reality is, they will be a better daughter or a better son when their parents are in a senior community, because they can be fully the daughter and the son and no longer have to be the caregiver. The same goes for the husband who's taking care of his wife who has dementia. He's not fully her husband anymore. He's a caregiver. He has to do the things that she doesn't like. He has to make her take the medicine. He has to make her take the shower. He has to keep her from leaving the house on her own. Those are not things that a husband should have to do. Those are things that we have professional certified dementia practitioners who know how to take care of people and can do those sorts of things. So you can just come in and be the loved one again and not have to play this other role that you are not trained for.
I want to go back just because one of the questions, like getting your history
Yeah.
thing, and then really the service that you provide and being a part of Care Patrol. I think just like every training I do and every meeting, I always share a little bit of my background and how I got here. It's important to earn that you've shared with us too. But I also like the history of the company. How did Care Patrol even come
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. So Care Patrol has a really interesting history. So started in 1993 by a medical social worker at a hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. And he experienced at least one patient that he was working with there have a very traumatic experience after leaving the hospital. And so he didn't end up in the right care environment for his needs. And that's because nobody knew sort of how to do this. It wasn't It wasn't something that people thought that much about. And he decided that he was going to take that experience and use it to create a way, a methodology, a process of helping people, helping families find the right care environment for their loved one in senior living. And so, fast forward to today, 32 years later, Care Patrol is in almost every state. There's 220 locations across the country. Every one of them is locally owned and operated. We know our communities really well because we live here. Our family members may be living in one of those senior communities now or at some point in the future. And so we take that very seriously, and we can understand what folks need because we understand the community, and we can also work together to help people move across the country or to another area if that's what they need, if that's what's
That
best.
was going to be a question of mine because I know that's my mom had to do that with my grandmother.
My folks live outside of Ann Arbor in Michigan. I'm here in Omaha, Nebraska. My brother is in Indiana. My sister is in Austin, Texas. If mom and dad need to move to a senior community, obviously we can find some place there for them when we know that there's a Care Patrol advisor who can help them there. But we could also have them move back to one of our communities, and we know that there are senior advisors in those places as well who can help them make that transition. And so we can all work together to help with that process and make sure. I know that when I refer one of the families that I'm working with to a Care Patrol advisor in another part of the country, I know that they're going to handle things the same way that I would, with the same type of professionalism and ethics and care and compassion that I would. They're going to do the same because we have the same mission, we have the same process and beliefs about how people should be treated.
If everybody even just has the half of heart of gold that you have, everyone's taken care of. I believe that. One of the things that I'm kind of curious about when I, even for me, started looking into a little bit about Care Patrol was just kind of really thinking about the questions because we're of that age where our parents, I mean, even for me, it's not if, but when this occurs. And so, and I recently had a close friend that her mother, it was time. And so she was asking me, like, what are some questions I would ask? And in our dialogue back and forth, just kind of discussing this transition, she'd never thought about it. But I started asking about, well, like how, even for me, was like, maybe you need to ask about like when things occur, like we do at Coro, like we have this first philosophy of care of using music or faith first before going to the med card.
Right.
And that was a conversation she hadn't even thought about. And then she couldn't let it go and everything. So I'm curious about that because I know I'm going to be asked this again one day. But how are those conversations? I mean, do they ask about, well, what activities are offered to my mom? What are dining experiences like? What is the process when she's super aggravated or really agitated or depressed? Like, what do you do? I mean, what is the relationship with a med card? Those kinds of things.
Right. Yes. All of those things come up. Right. So, and specifically, what you're talking about is more of a memory care type of situation. But even in assisted living, I mean, the places that I work with pride themselves on the food that they serve, and they pride themselves on the activities that they deliver, because those are key elements to why people are moving into senior living, because they're living at home, they're widowed, they don't cook for themselves anymore, they're eating microwave meals at best, and so they're not getting good nutrition. So moving to some place where they have 3 really good meals a day, snacks whenever they want them. I always like to say to people that I'm working with, if you are living in assisted living and you're hungry at the end of the day, that's your fault, because you get so much food. There's no way you can be hungry unless you're choosing not to eat it. So food is really key. I know One of the communities that I work with, their head chef was the head chef on a cruise line for years and years. So we're talking, that's the kind of food that we're
Mhm.
seeing. It's not cafeteria food. It's mostly scratch made food, cooked, served restaurant style, and obviously cooked in quantity, but it is not coming out of a can. It's not being microwaved. They're cooking it from scratch. And then the other piece of that is we've got the other reason to come to assisted living or memory is because we want to have something to fill our days, right? We're sitting home alone. All we're doing is watching the reruns all day long. We're not really getting any kind of social stimulation, mental stimulation, emotional stimulation. And so making sure that they're having really solid quality activities being delivered on a daily basis. And most of the places I know or I work with are starting their programming at 8 o'clock in the morning and it's running through 6, 7 o'clock at night. And there's something almost every hour. There may be a few breaks in the day. Definitely there's a little bit of downtime after lunch, sort of thing. But there's not very much time in which there's not something going on. I just talked to a lady earlier today, and she said her dad, a family member wanted to come and take dad out for lunch, and dad said, no, 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 not today. I've got this that's going on. I've got this that's going on. I've got this. Yes. And two of the things were there was a bus trip, and then they were playing pinochle. And the big problem was that potentially the bus trip and pinochle were going to overlap. And
Priorities.
that's where we are. He's so engaged in this community he moved to that he doesn't want to see his family as much
Oh,
because he wants to be doing these activities. And that's just like what I said earlier about mom living at home. She's going to have so much more stimulation going on here than she did, even if she lives in that multi-generational house with her daughter and grandchildren and son-in-law.
now I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm kind of more of your chaplain, just because,
Mhm.
like we were talking about a little bit of those statistics and studies. I have been told over the years that when it comes to people moving to independent living, assisted memory care, especially, but that when it came to offering spiritual support in any capacity, they just chose not to. So unless that they could get a volunteer from a church, it didn't matter the denomination, it didn't matter if they were
Right.
Catholic and so forth. But it just didn't. It seemed I couldn't understand if it was just the fear of providing something that might not be suitable, or it was just I don't have enough brainwidth, or I don't have enough time, enough energy, and so whoever wants to volunteer, I just place them here
Right.
and stuff. So my question is a little bit of a couple of different things. But why do you volunteered as a chaplain before, you have that hat, you've seen long-term care as a whole for 25 plus years. Why is that still such a challenge today, do you think?
It's a big, huge thing to undertake, right? So, okay, we want to offer spiritual care services. Which do we do? Whose do we do? I do work with a lot of communities that do a very good job of it. And maybe that's because I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. Maybe that's because of the communities that I'm working with. But I think that there is an expectation here in Omaha of having that available. We're
Mm.
a huge Catholic community. And so there have to be Catholic services offered wherever you go. And some of the communities I work with offer multiple services a week. Some
Oh,
do it even daily. But again, if they didn't have the church volunteering to come in, they probably wouldn't be able to do it. So they have this, they kind of get adopted by different parishes. And then on
mm,
top of it, maybe to a lesser extent, they kind of accept whatever Protestant denomination will come in and provide some services as well. And they try to cover, those are the two bases they try to cover, right? Catholic and Protestant. I just toured a lady the other day, and the executive director showed her the chapel and talked to her about what they had there. And she said, "And what's your denomination?" And the lady said, "I'm Mormon." And she's like, "Oh, we don't do anything Mormon." But she did say, "Well, I think there's a Mormon congregation in the next town over, and we'll call and see if they can come in and at least come and visit you on a weekly basis or something." There's some motivation to do that. But again, you can't necessarily do that for every individual, because this one wants Lutheran, this one wants Presbyterian, because there's so many different things. You have to narrow it down to Catholic and non-denominational. And then if there's any Jewish folks or Muslims or Buddhists or whatever, they're on their own. And yeah, so I think that it feels overwhelming. I also think there is not always the will to do that, because there is not the requirement to offer it. So when I worked in hospice, there was a requirement that hospice provided spiritual care services. It was not
Okay.
questioned whether you were going to have a chaplain on your staff, at least a volunteer chaplain, because it was required by Medicare that you had to provide this. Now, assisted living, at least in Nebraska, has no requirement to provide spiritual care services. So that's one of those things where we'll do what we can to be able to provide that. And so most places here do a really good job of it. And some do a better job than others, simply because of maybe their affiliation or their relationship with a particular parish or congregation or something like that. But everybody does something. And they try to offer at least those two alternatives: Catholic services and non-denominational services.
I know, it's interesting. We were kind of, when we rolled out Faith First, I mean, that was a big conversation of how do you roll out, like we do Catholicism was going to be in there, Judaism, Islam, Native American, general spirit. But when we got to Christianity, it was because I learned that there are 20,000 variations of Christianity. I had no idea. I thought it was just driving down your street and I could count a couple of different churches and that was it. And so that was a big challenge for us. But that was then looking for content that really just kind of helped support those transitions in life, long-term care communities, healthcare environments and things. But it is, I mean, I understand that it is overwhelming, because even for us, it was a delay in us rolling out Faith First. I want to say 6 months, a year, just because of that.
Yeah.
And it is the foundation, the United States is predominantly Christian.
Right.
And stuff. So yeah, that's been interesting to watch those conversations starting to increase from like where the conversations I heard then, that it's too overwhelming, or we only have a volunteer once a week, and if he gets sick or something like that.
Sometimes in memory care or memory support, we actually see more spiritual services being delivered, but not in the way that you would expect. It's the music. It's the playing of the hymns, having sing-alongs with the hymns, things like that, because those are things that people remember. Like you were saying about, we played country music for Dad, but Dad wasn't in a place where he remembered that he liked country music. But because the hymns go back so far and so deep into people's long-term memory, they resonate with those things. And so we often see in those environments more of that sort of spiritual care, just because it helps people to calm, helps people to be kind of centered, because it's comforting.
I love that, because it reminded me of the story. I'd only been with Coro for about maybe a year, and I got a phone call from a community, and it was their memory care director. And she's like, we have a resident she was brought to us a couple of months ago, and she's under the guardianship of the state. At the time, I didn't know what that was. And so I had to ask, and I did not even know that you can be an orphan as an elder. And learning that, thank goodness, it was like a 45-minute drive. I grabbed all of my tools that I knew to grab, drove down there, sat beside her. They put her in a wheelchair. She was in the final stages of Alzheimer's. And
Mm.
they just said that they knew, because she wasn't speaking, she wasn't verbal, that they just didn't have much to give, to something personal. And so they thought, oh, let's call Debbie and see about music. And so the little bit of information they were able to give me, it's kind of like trying to create like a playlist for someone, but you can't communicate with them, and how difficult that is. So I was trying all these things. I was on the phone with one of our music therapists, a music designer. We were all trying to, nothing, till we got to hymns.
Yes.
And I got to hymns and I played, and I'm going to try not to cry because I always cry at the story. I got to the second song of hymns. She lifts her head up and she says, wow, amen, and starts to rock side to side.
Oh.
I'm in tears. The nurse, everyone was surrounding us. And they said this was the first time they had ever even heard her voice.
Wow.
And stuff. And it was just that moment of playing a song, like you said. I mean, for all of us we talk about that we have comfort music, and we talk about comfort music is usually between the ages of 12 and 22. And that's like, for us, it's like, for me, it's 80s pop and 90s country. But even before that, it's the music that you listen to, and it's typically the music you listened to when you went to church, because you heard it over and over. You were reading the lyrics so it was sinking in. And because of whatever your faith is, whatever your community of faith is, that, for, like you said, that is an introduction for a lot of us, is music. And when you're living that lifeline in that direction, sometimes that's the only connection. And so, yeah, so thank you for sharing that, because that memory, I bring her with me and I will never forget. I can hear it. Wow and amen.
Yeah, that's amazing.
My last question for you.
Okay.
What is a question, and I end all of mine, so I'm not putting you on the spot because I do this to everybody. What is one question that I didn't ask that you really wish I had?
Oh, shoot.
Hopefully that's a good sign.
Yeah, I don't know if any questions that I think you should have asked. Oh, the question that usually comes up, right? It's the question that most often comes up for people, but I wish it didn't have to come up for people, which is, how much does this cost, right? How much do we pay for this, right? Because Medicare is not paying for this, right? This is assisted living and memory care is entirely private pay. And it, depending on the part of the country that you live in, it's not inexpensive. Here in Omaha, Nebraska, I tell somebody who's moving into assisted living, expect to pay between $4,000 and $6,000 a month. Might be a little bit less. It could be a whole lot more. It could be a lot more because we need more care, or it could be a lot more because we want to go to the fanciest, most swank, newest place that there is in town. And that's fine, because some people, they've saved their money and that's what they have money for. Now, luckily, most people at least have a house, and they can sell their house. Maybe they have some other assets, they can, if you sell your house, and you can probably 3 to 4 years of living in assisted living, that'll tide you by, right? The most common length of stay in assisted living is 2 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there's people that live there longer than that, and there's people that live there shorter than that, but generally it's about 2 years. And so there are some resources for folks who outlive their resources, and that there's the Medicaid waiver that can be used to pay for assisted living. But you have to run out of your resources. You have to qualify for Medicaid. People have to need a nursing home level of care, but we want them to stay in assisted living because it's more home-like, but it's also going to be less expensive for the state to pay for assisted living versus skilled nursing. So that's one for those people who do outlive their resources. We do have that available to them. And so I coach people around that. But not every assisted living community will accept the Medicaid waiver. And some of them want you to be a resident for X number of months before you can use that. So a lot of times it's 24 months or 36 months before you can use that Medicaid waiver. So again, if we're thinking that the average length of stay in assisted living is 24 months, it's kind of like, well, if you get over that hurdle, then, and you're still here, we're going to I always talk about it to people. It's kind of like your loyalty card at the Subway, at the sub shop, right? 10 punches and you get a
Yeah.
uh,
Yep.
free sub. Here, if you 24 months, you get a stay. We're not going to make you move out because you've been here. You're part of our community. We're not going to kick you out onto the street or make you move to a nursing home. We want you to stay here where it is your home. So that's why they're giving back that kind of loyalty to folks. One of the number one things that comes up for families is they want to know, how are we going to pay for this and how much is it going to cost? And it is a critical factor because we have to make sure we can match people up with the right places that they can afford for as long as they possibly can, so that they don't have to worry about what's going to happen next, and the family doesn't have to stress about it and those sorts of things.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Yeah, that was a good question that I did not ask. Well, I can't thank you enough for this and sharing your story. And I knew there was going to be something that, well, a lot that I didn't know, but especially the story about your grandmother.
Mm.
Like that one, that's a powerful story. And I'm just witnessing it. It's one of those things where I always think that when I go through some element of trauma or tragedy and I get to a place I can look back on it, it's like, why? Like, kind of like with God, why did you allow this to happen? And
Right.
but then it's like you see that, and just as awful as it was for you as a grandson to be a part of that, but now what you've done with your life because of that singular moment. So thank you for all you do, my friend.
Thank you for all you do, and thanks for having me on the podcast. It's been a great time and great connecting with you, and I look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Coro Chronicles. And can't wait to see you next episode.